everybody.
How are you?
How y'all doing?
Good.
Hey.
I love that video. Love that video. Shout out to the Facts team. Okay. Yes, that was great.
Absolutely.
Well, welcome everybody to our panelists and to our audience. Thank you so much for tuning in with us this evening. We're celebrating Mental Health Awareness Week, and we have a great panel planned for you all. All right. We have some great people on this panel today, so it's going to be great. This talk is going to be great. We're calling this Coming Together to Change the Narrative, and we're going to be talking about mental health as it pertains to the family. Okay. And this talk wouldn't be possible if two lovely organizations didn't come together and put this thing together. Those two organizations are Facts, Families Are Coming Together Strong, and Narrative Shifts, okay? And we do have the masterminds behind both of those organizations here today, so y'all know it's gonna be lit. It's gonna be lit. My name is Brianna Brown, and I'm the Development Associate Intern for Facts. And I have the privilege of being your moderator this evening. And y'all, it's my first time, so pray with me, okay? Just pray with me, all right? Let's get into introducing our panelists, okay? We'll start with Miss Rajette Peterson. Give them a wave, Rajette. Yes. So Miss Rajette Peterson is the mastermind behind Narrative Shifts, and the focus of that organization is to redefine and reframe the stories that go out about us Black people. Okay, y'all, she is shedding a positive light on our stories, our melanin, and I just love that. So a little bit more about Miss Rajette. She is representing our 40 plus group. Okay, 40 and 5.
Yes. Go.
40 and 5.
Wait, hold on. I didn't know you were screaming out ages and all that.
I know.
Just a little bit to give the people, a sense of who you are,
A little bit.
where you coming from. Just a little information, all right, y'all. Bear with me. Oh, I didn't tell them the exact number, so we good.
Okay.
We good. Rajette is she is a middle school math teacher currently, and it doesn't stop there, y'all. She is going to be pursuing her second master's degree in the fall at Michigan State in social work. So
wait, you gotta back it up because you got 3 U of M University in Michigan.
My bad.
That's like almost a deadly sin. That's like Georgia State and whatever y'all fight with. So
my bad. I appreciate you correcting me, y'all. Feel free to correct me if I say something wrong. Okay, I don't want to mess that up. But that is Rajette, y'all. Next up, we have Marcos Harris Jr. With us today. So Marcos is representing our 20 plus group. Okay, represent us well, Marcos. All right, hold it down.
Got you.
Yes, exactly. He is a student. He's a student at Tennessee State University right now, majoring in business administration, with a concentration or emphasis in supply chain management and a minor in marketing. And you dabble in a couple other things too. You sent me in your bio, like digital marketing, fashion, all that good stuff. He dabbles in consulting, teaching, motivational speaking. Y'all, Marcos is on fire. Okay, so glad you can be on this panel.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Derrick Jackson. Okay, representing for the 40 plus group too. Yes,
that's right. I'm proud of it.
Yes, exactly. I love that. Proud of it. He is well, let me see. You're a social worker and you run a police agency. Okay. So that's a really cool combination. I've never heard of that combination before this talk. So I love that. And I'm waiting on your perspective in this talk. Okay. For real. And last but not least, we have Crystal Allen Joyner, y'all. She is the founder of Facts, Families Are Coming Together Strong. And she She's been married for 19 years, y'all, and she has 3 sons. And she's a military spouse as well. And for a living, she is a licensed professional counselor, okay,
Yeah.
and certified rehabilitation counselor as well. And she also has her own private practice called Regal, and that is receiving everlasting grace and love counseling services.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
y'all.
good.
So, like I said, we got some great people on this panel.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get into it, y'all. This is an informal conversation, so we do want y'all to participate in it. I mean, if you want to comment, if you want to drop a question in the chat, whatever you want to do that. Okay. Prayerfully, we're able to, get to some questions at the end if y'all have any. Okay. So do that. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into it. Okay. So first question. I want us to take a mental field trip. Okay. If you will. All right. Think about your childhood. Okay, I told y'all we were talking about mental health in the family. So I want you to think about your childhood, and I want you to think about what communication looked and felt like in your household while growing up. And if you could describe it in a few words, what would you say about it?
Who wants to go first?
Anybody jump in.
I'll just jump in.
All right.
Cool.
So, I'm the oldest of 4, and we lived in a small house. And so I always think back to, it was loud in the house at all times. You got 4 kids running around. And communication kind of developed, you just kind of get in where you could fit in. We're a really close family. We stayed close all these years. And so there's a lot of love in the household. And I feel like we just kind of flowed together, naturally kind of flowed together. Whenever serious issues came up, I think it was really just addressing it head on. Like, my dad was not shy about calling us out when we were doing things we weren't supposed to do. But I think we also got to observe him really just call out neighbors or, have that difficult conversation. So seeing that when I was young, when I think about the question, I think conflict or challenges, it was just something we learned just to face head on.
Yeah. I love that.
That's good.
Well, Derrick, I'm the youngest of 5, and I'm still in the deep South, but I grew up in Atlanta, you guys. So let's see here. Conversation in my household. It wasn't loud. It was quiet conversation. Almost kind of like a glass house. Some subjects probably were off limits, and not so much it was off limits, but we just did talk about certain topics, or it was limited discussion. But it was lots of love, lots of affirmation, lots and lots of affirmation, always being taught that you can do anything you put your mind to. So that was like the whole family dynamics was, you can be anything that you want to be, lots of love and lots of affirmation.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'll go next. So I was raised an only child. And so for me, it looks a little bit different. I'm very extroverted by nature. I would have to say that my mom is probably extroverted, my dad, not so much. And so in terms of communication in the house, similar to Crystal, there were several things that were just off limits or taboo. Like, we just didn't talk about certain things. And as an only child, raised an only child, I do have siblings, but we just weren't raised in the same household. For me, a lot of communication, honestly, coming from the parental side, it wasn't a lot of open dialogue. It was just do's and don'ts, a lot of do's and don'ts, but positive affirmations in terms of, you can do anything you want to do. Like, that is something that was deeply, deeply, just entrenched in our upbringing, in my family. And so that was something that was huge. But in terms of having some of the difficult conversations, right, that was not necessarily something that was on the table. I would have to say that between the 2 parents, and it was a 2-parent household, my dad, actually, I could probably sit and have more of the challenging conversations with, just because his demeanor is a little bit different. Like, he's way chill and, really reflective and this kind of thing. Whereas with mom, it was going to be a little bit more of like the do's and the don'ts. It wasn't that she wasn't approachable, because, I could definitely talk to her about some things, but it may not have been a conversation where we were going to have just sort of an equal exchange of just conversation. It wasn't going to be an equal exchange. Whereas with my dad, it would be.
Right.
Cool. And so for me, for most of these questions, I'll probably go last because I like to listen to everybody else. And I would like to say my upbringing was it was a blend of all three of y'all's, honestly. So obviously, Uncle D being my uncle, right? A lot of those things that he spoke about was passed down. I mean, my mom is his sister. Same thing. I've been raised in Tennessee, so I am in the South. So a lot of those things, right? So we would have in the household, you mess up, you get called out on it, but everything was behind closed doors, right? You step out the house, or you get out the car, there's no conflict. No crying. Get your act right, right? So it was kind of a beautiful blend of all of it. Everything from, like y'all said, the affirmations and whatnot, and me being the oldest of three boys. It's always loud over here. If it's not loud, that's when there is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Would y'all say that, your siblings had a lot to do with the way y'all were raised, the way y'all learned to communicate? Those of you who have siblings, would y'all say that they played a major part in who you are today, communication wise?
For me, being the youngest of 5, so everybody's got their own personalities.
Yeah.
And the unique aspect of growing up in such a big household is that everybody had and we still have our own individual, unique relationships with each other. It's pretty funny.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes I guess people would think that if you come from a huge household, everybody's relationships are the same across the board, but it's not, because we all have various personalities. And so some things I may talk about to one sibling, I may not talk about with another sibling. But, it kind of just balances out over time. And then, of course, it goes into seasons where you may talk to one sibling more about certain things than you would the other. As far as communication, I think it's grown and developed over the years, Brianna. Yeah. As we get older, as we learn things differently, as we experience life differently, and just start growing and developing as adults, definitely our communication amongst the siblings has increased over the years.
That's good. That's really good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I probably should have said at the beginning. So Marcos is my nephew. His sister, his mom is my sister, and so we're only a year apart. And I remember growing up, all through high school, I just wanted to get away from my little sister. Right, she was always there, and so I do think that influenced some of the communication. Like, I was seen as the big brother, and so even today, I think I carry some of that. As far as like being the big brother, the oldest. But just to your point, Crystal, it is interesting how even though we spent so much time in the same household, the relationships are different depending on the sibling, and they do change over time. All my siblings are older. My brother, who's 10 years younger than me, was always like the baby. Now he's a grown man, right? And so it has shifted over time, the kinds of stuff we're talking about. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're dramatically different, but they have been different depending on the timing. And again, part of that was just based on age. My sister Kelly was just a year younger than me, so we were a little bit closer in age. My younger sister and brother were 8 and 10 years younger, and so the kind of conversations when I was having in high school, like the younger siblings weren't there yet.
They weren't. Yeah. They weren't on that page.
It changed pretty dramatically for me and my sister Kelly. Like, once she got to college, once we were both in college. We got really close. And part of that, I think, was because we were away from the nucleus of the family. We were kind of off on our own, and we were geographically close to one another. And so we spent more quality time. We were siblings. So we were back home. We were rivals because she was only a year. We arguing over the bathroom. But once you get out the house, like, you family, right? Nobody understands better than us. So
and y'all, we do have a family affair here. If y'all didn't pick up on that, so
yeah, we do.
Everybody related here, y'all. So
the little things.
Right.
So Marcos, I know you said you would go last in the set, but since you have siblings, you can answer this, and then I'll kind of go back for this one.
Yeah, sounds good. So for me, it's kind of strange. I'm just now getting to the point where I can have conversations with my brothers. My brothers being 5 and almost 7 years younger than me. You know, I'm only 20, so a conversation between the 13 and the 18-year-old is completely different, right? And now that my brothers are getting to high school age, and I've been through that, they have been, you know, coming to me more with just normal questions and stuff that, you know, high schoolers want to know or questions that they have. So we're just now getting to that point to where, you know, we're building, you know, a true relationship other than just the sibling rivalry. Because that's honestly what it's been pretty much up until maybe 2017 when I first moved out. It was always, you know, little brother, big brother fighting over everything.
Right.
Okay. For me, so I mean, again, growing up an only child, you know, my siblings were basically my first cousins, my cousins, and so the closest in proximity, one of them is like on here. I can see the chat, but you know, I would have to say that a lot of my communication was actually built through those conversations with her and her brother, because we were just so close. And so, you know, having a lot of conversations, we didn't have a lot of conflict. I was the youngest of that set, and we spent a lot of time together. She's 10 years older than me. He is 5 years older than me. And it was just a good time. Like, you know, we had the opportunity to express, you know, quite a bit. We had we have a very powerful respect for one another in our family. So between siblings. And so that was something that's always been upheld. And to your point about, you know, the family affair. So Crystal is my cousin. And so even to that point, when we were young, we're the two babies of the family. So she was the baby in Maryland, and I was the baby in Michigan. And we were always together. Like, you know, when we would come down or she would come up, like we spent the most time, I would have to say. You would agree, Crystal, like together. And we loved hanging out until we didn't. And so we would have real arguments and just real beef, and then just be great like after that, right? Okay. And so we have like a wonderful shared just relationship over the years. And I think it's been beautiful to see it develop even, you know, so while we don't even talk a whole lot, you know, because of distance and just schedule and life, the bond that we have has been unbreakable, I would have to say, over the years. So
right. So when y'all get together, it's like y'all never lost the beat, right?
Literally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go
Brianna,
ahead.
You know, I was thinking about something that Marcos said earlier. I think it was Marcos and Derrick, the sibling rivalry. I don't really remember experiencing that being the youngest. What I do remember being the baby is the baby doesn't know what the baby is talking about, you know, trying to be seen.
Right.
So I remember that part, you know, listen to your siblings type. And then like Rajette said earlier, the dynamics was respecting each other. Like we weren't allowed to fight. We definitely weren't allowed to curse at each other. So we couldn't lay hands when we wanted to lay hands on each other. We couldn't do that.
Okay.
So it wasn't, I won't say that it was like a perfect upbringing. No, it wasn't, because I'm sure there was conflict and there was conflict. But as stated earlier, some stuff was just off limits. You know, some things you just didn't say, some things you just didn't do. You know, you kind of take care of each other. So that was my dynamics. Yeah.
And go ahead, Derrick. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, you know, I agree with that, Crystal. And I think just going back to the original question too, around like how did that relationship with your siblings maybe influence you to this day? I mean, we just learned in the household, same as you, Crystal, right? There were certain things you just didn't do to your siblings. There was a lot of love there. And I think that it's carried forward with even some of my professional work and stuff outside of the family, is like how you treat people. I think I really learned by how you first treat your family, right? And how you treat your siblings and how they're supposed to treat you. So yeah, we had some sibling rivalries because my sister was always there as my little sister. But I feel like there was always, and Dad was pretty clear on there, there's certain things you just don't do, right? You don't say certain things, you can't do certain things with your siblings. So you're right, there was definitely some off limits. It's interesting though, the difference between oldest and youngest, because I'm curious, Crystal, We still treat, and I think my brother's on here watching. We still treat him like that. He's a grown man, and we still talk about him like he's a baby.
You know what, Derrick? That is true. But what's funny now, I think probably in the last 5 years, I think we're all on the same playing field. Yeah. I don't know what has happened. Now, I know Brianna mentioned earlier, I'm married. My husband's military, so we traveled around a whole lot, and I can remember. My siblings don't know this, so they're watching, so they're gonna hear this for the first time. But in the back of my mind, saying I do know what I'm talking about. I got something to say, and so I would say maybe in the last 5 years, that playing field has leveled out. Like we're all on the same playing field. There is no level of hierarchy.
Yeah.
And I just think that has come with maturity, honestly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. On all of our behalves.
Yeah. I think for us, sorry, Brian, I was just gonna say
no, it's okay.
Yeah, for us it was just he's just always been baby brother. But you're right, it's so funny because we're talking about property and buying houses and running businesses and some of those kinds of conversations. And in some parts of his life he is further advanced than I am, right? And so you're right, there's some leveling of the playing field. It is harder for, I think, the older brother to look at the younger brother and just see and not think of him as the baby brother, right? So it's interesting when you said that.
Yes. Yes.
I can remember, you know what, this is good. I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna let Brianna take over. But I can remember a few years back, this was probably maybe like three or 4 years ago. My brother is who's closest to me. He's 4 years older than me. And I remember him and I had a conversation and he was like, well, sis, you've been gone. I always look at you as being like baby sis. And I'm like, I'm grown. Like I ain't kid sister no more,
Grown.
Yeah, I got kids. I got a whole life. I've got some experiences. But see, my life after I graduated from college, it kind of just went into a totally different direction. I moved away almost immediately. And then I just have been moving since then. So being at home, I may have come home probably maybe once or twice a year. And so you try to see everybody, but that's for holidays and it's really quick, time that's spent together. And so not really being able to kind of talk about things. So it's funny how my relationship with my brother has evolved over the years, because for years he kind of saw me as I'm just a baby sister. Yeah. Right. And so now it's like I said, everybody's on the same playing field now.
And y'all talk to each other about real stuff, real life.
Like, real life.
Okay. I love that, y'all. I love that. And thank God that relationships changed, because y'all, my sister, she 10. And she going to 6th grade. And she's our powerhouse. So she the last one too. And it's like, who are you? Wait, what happened? See, me and my brother's 15, and we kind of right there together, like y'all said, leveling out. We kind of right there together. We real chill, real mellow. But my little sister, y'all, pray with me. It'll develop though. It'll
develop over time.
I have hope. Y'all. Moving on. I do want to ask Marcos. This one is for Marcos and Rajette. Okay, I want to see what y'all think about this one. So, do you remember a specific experience where you wish you were parented differently? And I mean, y'all, Crystal and Derrick, y'all can join in too. I just wanted to, kind of just throw that out there to them for sure. Because I got a question for y'all next.
This one's sticky. I'm going to go first because Marcos told me he was going last. He already declared that. So I guess I'm going to declare a thing and it's going to be a thing. Listen, I don't know that I have any specific examples. Okay. But what I can say is that, while I obviously appreciate good parenting and being in a 2-parent household, and again, just the legacy of our family is really rich and deep. One of the things that, growing up as an only child, one of the challenges I had sometimes was just really not feeling like my parents knew me. You know, and so in terms of the parenting aspect, you know, they're both working. So, you know, they were both working like full time. And then my mom had kind of took an early retirement, and then she was, you know, spending more time with me at that point. But we had a lot of conflict, to be honest, you know, like just through those tumultuous teen years. And that's, you know, that's common across the board.
Yeah.
For me, I think I would have probably enjoyed or benefited more from the openness of conversations, or feeling like I could talk about certain things, you know, that I was dealing with, because I internalized a lot, you know, and thankfully I did have, you know, my first cousins that I could just kind of check in with, Joy, or, you know, like Harold, or, you know, some other cousins in our camp, where I could kind of bounce some ideas off and that kind of thing and get, you know, some advice. But in terms of that parenting aspect, for me, it really would have just looked like more conversation, less, more openness, right? Openness, you know, when communicating things, less judgment. And obviously this is old school, you know, a little old school. I'm 43, so it looks a little different than kind of the new generation, and, you know, having the latitude to have certain conversations anyway, right? So I would say that, yeah, that's what I'll say. Maybe I'll think of something else specific later. But yeah.
No, I completely relate with that. Yeah. You say it's old school, but I'm over here 25, and I'm like, looking back, like, yeah, I could have benefited from, you know, a little more open conversation as well. Because going back to, I believe, what Crystal said, or maybe Derrick said, something about a glass house, you know, some things just in touch, you know what I'm saying? So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Cool. For me, mom and dad, don't toot your own horn. So for me, I can't say that I wish that I was like there was times where I wish I was parented differently, solely because if I wasn't parented that way, I wouldn't have the understanding that I do now. There were times me and my dad just had this conversation about, because it was something that was always repeated to us, but then it's like, you know, sometimes as the parent, it's like, let me flip it onto myself. And we pretty much had a conversation about him listening to me rather than just hearing me, right? We always tell our kid, you hear me, but you're not listening, right? And so there's been times where it's like, to Rajet's point, right? I kind of felt like y'all don't understand like what I'm trying to say. And similarly to what we were talking about, the oldest sibling and the youngest sibling, like we see the youngest sibling as the baby. Well, for me, not having an older sibling, moving down to Tennessee, so my older cousin, he was only 6 months older than me. He lived however far Michigan is from Tennessee, that far away. So I was kind of seen as the youngin because I was always with the adults, never with the kids. And so now we're getting to the point where I'm bringing up points, or they're looking at my Facebook posts and they're like, whoa, like, where's this coming from? Like, you know, all those types of things. And I've been saying these things forever, but now folks are starting to listen. So it's not just, I hear you, cool, whatever. Now it's, all right, let's internalize. And that goes from everything, just from, you know, just from emotions to just pointing out my views or religion or whatever, right? But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I wish there was a point where I was parented differently, because then I wouldn't even be able to understand how I speak to people, or how, like, now I'm intentional on listening rather than just hearing, which is why I said I want to speak last, because I actually want to listen, not just kind of, you know, speak and be thinking of my next response rather than, you know, really digesting what's being said.
You know, it's interesting, Marco, what you said about listening. You know, that's it's an art to that within itself. It's actually hearing somebody's, you know, emotions, listening to the emotions behind words. And, you know, as parents, I'm a parent on here, and as a parent, you know, either you typically gonna parent the same way that you were parented, or you're gonna do the complete opposite. You know, whether good, bad, or indifferent. And so, Brianna, when you asked that question, you know, I was thinking about what Rajet was saying. And even what I said earlier, I know that when I got married, one of the major things that I said when I have children is I want them to be able to come to me about anything. And so as a mental health professional, in the field, I see that a lot. I see where children are not able to kind of speak freely. But see, and then there's a fine line with the speaking freely thing as well.
Right.
You know, there has to still be a level of respect there. And so I remember with my two youngest sons, I have a gifted baby as well. So that's my stepson. So he wasn't raised here in the home with us. But my two biological sons, I remember when they first started the preteens, and their mouths started to increase.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the feelings and the emotions. And it was like, you know, be quiet because I told you to be quiet, or no, we're not doing this because I said we're not. And I'm realizing, even as a therapist, that you have to be willing to evolve with the times, not throw away what you've learned, but you have to evolve with it. Because what I see now is that children, all generations, are being faced with so many different things. I mean, they have so much access to so much, and you want to be not a friend, but you want to be able to have that open dialogue. And that is one of the things that I have it now as an adult, but because I think that was something that I fostered as an adult. But I can't say I necessarily had the open dialogue to really say, hey, well, you know what? I don't like this, but why is it like this? Or what about that, without being judged or without being ridiculed or without, you know, feeling as if that's off limits, because, you know, life is going to happen.
Right.
You know, we have to be willing and being prepared to talk about everything. But I think about, you know, our generation of parents, they did a great job. They did a great job with the skill sets of what they had. And so that's it. I mean, we're living proof of the great job that they've done. And so all we can do is kind of take the torch now and just kind of modify it.
Yeah.
I just want to add one piece, because my pops is on here. I seen him commenting. You know what I would change? I got so many spankings as a little boy. Man.
Oh, no.
So look, it made me who I am today. So I, you know, in some ways I'm half joking, but listen, those spankings was no joke back in the day. That belt,
I didn't get that, Betty.
Man, if I can go back and change some of that and still be who I am today, I'd take that out the equation.
Well, you know what? That's interesting, Derrick, because I didn't get that many whoopings. Look, I'm one of them kids that everybody else probably got whooped. But I learned what not to do based off of everybody else.
You watched all your own siblings.
I did. So I learned what not to do. But you know what? That's interesting, because I always get that question sometimes with people who are raising younger kids. And you said you wouldn't, if you could take that out of the equation. How do you see, what's your viewpoint on that with whoopings and spankings and things like that?
So I think I learned from it. So I spanked my child, Justice, is my daughter, a teenage daughter now. But I think I learned from what I seen there. Someone actually said to me, they was like, if you ever are disciplining your child out of anger, you need to check yourself. And so I just always tried to think about that. And so, you know, like a smack on the hand is different than grabbing, you know, something and like whacking and beating and abusing your kid. And so that was always in my mind somehow. I was always just trying to think of, like, even if I'm just talking to my daughter at the time, like, am I speaking out of anger? Did she trigger something in me? And just trying to be very conscious and intentional about that. And so, you know, I think I'm at a balanced perspective. Like sometimes, you know, that smack on the hand is not necessarily a bad thing. How far you take that, I think is something to really be considered for people to think about.
Yeah. I just want to add, go ahead.
Well, Derrick, I'm gonna say this real quick. I like the fact when you said, how am I speaking? You know, how is my tone? I used to be a yeller. Ooh, man, I was a yeller. Goodness, I could yell.
You, Crystal?
Really? This is surprising for me to hear, actually.
No, I was a yeller. I'm telling you, I was a yeller. But then I realized that how effective is that? You know, am I quieting their spirits? You know, these are little human beings. So I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that.
So I caught all of the spankings that Crystal did not. That's facts.
You stayed in trouble, Jack. You stayed in trouble.
And you know what? And it wasn't because of behavior, because I was never into a bunch of craziness, but it was this mouth. And so, you know, you were talking earlier about, you know, just how we communicate. And I can only remember being young and always saying what was on my mind. So this candor that I know some of you guys on this panel know about me, it's been with me since childhood. I mean, Crystal can attest to this. And I definitely caught consequences for that. But it was one of these things that it just, for me, there was always a fine line, a true line of what's true and what's not. Right. And so if I saw someone not communicating in truth, right, in their truth, whatever it is, I actually used to call this out. Joyce is laughing at me in the chat. Like I used to call it out and I still do. And that's the thing that I think as a child, I got in tons of trouble for that because I called a spade always. And so I would weigh my consequences. Like, all right, if I say this, I know I'm gonna catch it. If I say this, I know I'm gonna be on punishment. Like that was the time reason, and I really did. And it's interesting hearing this. I'm so when I said it was surprising for me to hear, Crystal, that you were a yeller in the beginning.
Oh man, I got down.
And you came from such a quiet environment because I remember your house when we would go visit, like your house was so calm to me. Like it was just like, y'all quiet,
Yeah, I just said it. It was very quiet.
Yeah, everybody was quiet in Auntie's house with all the kids. I'm like, how is this? How are they so quiet, right? And so it's just that is interesting. I just want to make one more point based off of because I jotted it down here. I'm not a parent. But a lot of parents, they'll say, I want my children to be able to have these open conversations with me. I want, so the desire is there perhaps. What I have learned, because I do teach, is that is a practice. That is a muscle that has to be developed. Because for as much as you are saying, okay, I want my kids to be able to come to me, you may want that. And you may even tell them that, but it still doesn't feel like I can. Does that make sense? So like even with my parents, again, like they were always like, yeah, you can talk to us. But then I was like, yeah, I don't know, because I know I'm gonna catch it.
Right. You really want me to tell you?
I'm talking about Auntie first. Like that was kind of some of that dynamic, because that practice wasn't, I don't believe, developed, between all of us, in my childhood growing up. So yeah.
Y'all, my husband is in the chat talking about all she did was yell at the boys. We had to go down for prayer. He's so wrong.
Off the call.
He's so wrong. I wish he was on this chat. I wish. He is such a non-yeller.
Yeah.
And so that's what's funny. He's just, and I think he grew up in a household where there was a lot of yelling and a lot of chaos. And so he was determined to have the complete opposite. So we had to figure this thing out. We had to fit. Well, I had to figure it out.
Right.
Rajette, I was just gonna jump on something you said, Rajette, about you may say you want your kids to speak to you and talk to you, but are you really ready for it? And I think that's something that I learned is I've always wanted my daughter to be able to come to me. Like you have this vision in your head of what it is, but you better be ready for some of those conversations and be ready to really, as Marco said, to really listen to what they're saying. I just wanted to make that piece. Like as a parent, I think you really got to be ready and prepared because some of the things they bring to you, you want to protect your kids so much. You don't want them to get hurt. You don't want them to step off the rails and do something really horrible. And so sometimes that natural parenting kicks in where you just want to protect them. And I think that's where it goes to your point, Marcos, where parents aren't really listening to you. They hear you and then they jump into action versus really just kind of listening and let your child go through what they need to go through to learn the same things that you had to. So no, that just really pricked at my mind when you said that, Rajette.
That's awesome.
And speaking of parenting, do you, Crystal or Derrick, have any, experiences where you wish you parented your child differently? Do y'all have anything?
Oh, I hope they don't remember anything in the early years.
Oh no! You were figuring it out.
No, they don't remember nothing between the ages of probably like 0 to maybe 10. I just remember, y'all got to consider my background now. Yeah. So, I'm the baby moving away from family right after college. Not having a huge, strong support system because we were moving around military and just trying to figure things out for myself, as an adult, as a wife, as a mom. all of that. And so I know that there were a lot of frustrating periods. And it's funny because my oldest birth son, he made the comment, we were having these little family discussions. We have a lot of those these days. And he was saying, you know, Mom, I remember you being tired a lot. And so a lot of times we parent out of frustration, you know, out of situations. And I've told him, I'm like, well, remember the good things. Don't remember the bad things. Then I'm like, well, you might have to go get some therapy because I need the best job I could.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say the yelling. But I've learned, like you said, Derrick, you got to be prepared for those conversations. At this point, thank God, honestly, and it has not always been like that, but our boys can come to us about absolutely anything. I mean, I've got a good example. Our oldest son just recently kind of started dating, and he would go to these little parties. And at the parties, he didn't know what the parties was going to be like because he's kind of a late bloomer. And so when he came home one evening, I said, how did the party go? And he was like, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, well, you know, it's a lot of drugs. And I'm like, what you mean drugs? I'm like, what kind of drugs? You know, I'm about ready to go tear. What you mean? You know, but I had to catch myself, and I was like, oh, what kind of drugs? And so he was like, you know, anything you want, a smorgasbord of just stuff. And I said, wow. I said, so what were you doing? You know, and he was like, I was just kind of on my phone, you know, just kind of having these awkward moments. And I said, wow, I guess it's not what you thought it was going to be like. And so what's the funny part about all this is he went back a couple of weeks later. He asked, could he go out? And we knew where he was going. And so I was telling my husband, I was like, you know, he's going to one of those, they call them sets. And, you know, what's there? I said, you know, we got to have this conversation with him because you can't keep playing with fire and expect not to get burned, you know? And so when he came home, you know, we had this conversation with him, and he was mature about it. He understood it. Because at the end of the day, I've always talked about my experiences and things that I was exposed to. And even my mishaps, you know, one thing that I have done differently is I don't want to portray perfection. You know, I don't want my kids to think that I was perfect. Not even now, you know, you make mistakes. And that's one of the things that I make sure I go back and I'll apologize if I've made mistakes, or, you know, I'll say, Mama's not perfect. Mama made this decision. But yeah, you said earlier, Rajette, it's a practice. It's an art to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's an art to controlling your own anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, with these tough conversations, but just thinking about how blessed you are when they do come to you about stuff, because I'd rather them come to me than go to the streets and get it.
Right. And get it wrong, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if you guys, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Roger. Go ahead.
I don't know if you guys are seeing it because there's so many things, but there I saw in the chat, Chief Levite. Did you see that, Brianna?
He said
two. He has one part of it, and then the second part. I think this is
and so it's a really good comment. It says, in my early days of parenting, I found it hard to let my children actually have feelings. We're taught to, you know, resort to sayings like "fix your face" or "I'll give you something to cry about," and that's real. That's real. And then the next part of it says, "Now I still struggle to find that balance to let them be human."
That's powerful.
That's huge. And Chief Levite, it's interesting that I'm so glad you said that in the chat. I too have struggled with that because I was be quiet and listen, shut up and color.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the mama, you the child, you don't ask questions. And I had to realize and honestly being in therapy myself and as a therapist, evolving and understanding that these are little humans and they're going to have feelings. And when I deny them of their feelings, what am I doing later in life? How is that going to manifest into anxiety, their lack of being able to communicate, or a whole bunch of yelling, you know, a whole bunch of just chaos as adults when we don't allow them to express their feelings, you know, within order, within reason.
I feel triggered right now, but I'm gonna just.
I'm sorry. She said she feels triggered.
Hey, I listen. I remember that saying. I give you something to cry about.
Yeah,
though.
right.
It's like I'm already crying.
That part,
Right.
Hey, but Brianna, just to get to your question too, you're asking about things you would have done different. That's probably a better question for my daughter because she probably could tell you, like Crystal's son could tell you some of the things. But I would say there are definitely times, though, in specific instances where I feel like I made mistakes. And if I could go back and say something different, not yell, as Crystal said, or not get angry at certain things, or just shut up and listen, like Marcos would tell us to do at some point. Like, I think there are definitely times in my mind where I would have taken very specific instances and I would have done them differently, for sure. For me, though, I'll say this, like, I've always wanted to be a father. I can remember at a young age thinking, like, I can't wait to be a dad. And, I'm a social worker. And one of the things that drew me into social work was this conversation with a professor one day around how the human brain develops, right? And like how important it is those first 3 years of a child's life. And so that fascinated me, how the brain develops. So by the time I became a father, I was thinking about all these social work kinds of things. I probably, I probably overcompensated with
all the
social
concepts.
work.
Yeah.
But I was very conscious of how my current behavior as a parent might impact my child later on in life. And so, again, not painting a picture that it was perfect. I was at least just conscious of it. But there were definitely times when I was wrong and I did some things. And I think Kristen, you said this, I think this is an important piece. It's okay for parents to tell their kids they were wrong. Right.
Yes.
I made a mistake. I think that's an important thing to be able to do. So kudos, Crystal, for being able to do that with your kids. I think it's important.
Yeah. I think somebody in the chat said, we teach our kids how to lie. I think it was, we teach our Jarrell. So, we teach our kids how to lie when we deny them of their feelings.
That's powerful.
That is real.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
And I love this other comment by Tatiana Bell. It says, I feel like my parents are afraid to tell me of mistakes they made, but blow mine out of proportion. Yeah. And I think that goes back to that piece. Well, part of it goes back to that piece about, wanting to be respected by your kid and walking that fine line. Like, okay, I'm the mama, I'm the daddy, you the child. So don't cross that barrier. So I really do resonate with that one. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. There was a comment. Kev on stage. He's a comedian. On YouTube, y'all may saw him, or y'all may follow him. He was commenting on a tweet from someone. I think her name is Unique Jones. And she listed some questions that she asked her children. And some of those questions, it was, do you feel, loved by mommy and daddy? Do you need anything else from mommy and daddy? Like really like checking in on her kids. Like she makes that a priority, it seems. And then she goes to list, questions that she was asked in her childhood. And, some of them questions is like, did you do your homework? Did you clean your room? What's your grades looking like? And then I think the last one she said, the last question she listed was, do I look like Boo Boo the Food to you? Like she really put it out there with that comment, but that was real. And Kev on stage, he could really relate to it.
I used that a couple times though. I'm sorry, Justin. Daddy was wrong. I look like Boo Boo the Food to you. I think I remember saying that.
Oh man. Something I want to add to that, or just kind of, what I wrote down here is that these parental check-ins, and again, I'm not a parent, but I get to see a different side, and I engage with parents so much. What I see often from parents when they have multiple children, or even just, an only child, if they have a high functioning only child or a high functioning, very independent child that just kind of does everything pretty right, for the most part, not really gives them any challenges. What I see a lot is that sometimes the parents neglect to check in as much because they're like, oh, they got this. You know what I'm saying?
They got it figured out. Yeah.
they're so used to them functioning at a certain level, being independent, doing the right thing always. And so kind of almost just having an assumption of like, oh yeah, they're good. That's what they do. They're fine, you know, and that child, you know, I get the outlet or the expression of it in the school setting. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it looks a little different. And while at home, it may appear like, yeah, this kid is cool in the class environment amongst peers, right? Like these types of things where they're engaging now with maybe less high functioning or fewer high functioning individuals, right? Or whatever the case may be, those dynamics look really different in the school setting. And so, you know, I just sometimes even encourage to my parents, ask your kids, ask them. So even if they're the most angelic kid at home, still have these check-ins with them. So I love that you brought that to the table. Kev on stage, yeah, for sure. I love that. Good stuff.
Yes. Kev on stage. He's real. He's real. Moving on. I want to ask this one. So it kind of goes into what you just said, Roger. This could be yours. I want to ask, what is one piece of practical advice you would give a new parent? So yeah, I like your idea of like checking in with your kid, those parental check-ins. I love that. Yeah.
I think
do you have any?
Yeah, I do. And again, I'm not a parent, full disclosure. But you know, one of the things that I just think it's important to have those open lines of communication. It's just going back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, you know, where it's being open, not having this judgment seat. You can have boundaries that are strong that you can set so that, you know, these kids know, okay, this is what we're not gonna do, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna play with mama about this.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you can definitely open up these lines of communication. Now, one thing where that gets sticky is if the parents don't understand good boundaries themselves. That's where it gets sticky. So let's say the parents don't have good boundaries and they spill all over everybody else's boundaries, right? When it comes down to parenting their children and they're trying to have, you know, this sort of open conversation, if they don't have effective or good boundaries themselves, they will almost inevitably begin to, you know, not they'll what's the word I'm trying to say here? I'm sorry. They will almost every time injure these kids, you know. So even though they have the mindset of, okay, yes, you can have these conversations with us, it's open. If they don't have good boundaries themselves, they're not going to be able to do that. It's not in them to do it. So again, it's a practice. They've got to get some kind of help. So I would say, you know, any new parent or any, you know, parent that really is trying to work on this, it's a matter of learning boundaries. I really think boundaries at the end of the day is one of the most critical pieces across the board, you know, but a lot of people don't really understand the depth of boundaries. It's layered. Boundaries are important.
You know, you said something about judgment. And so that's how we view it, as it being judgmental. You know, when you go to your parent and then they're saying, well, why would you want to blah, 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 blah. But I want to talk to Derrick specifically about this from a security and, you know, the police perspective of it all. You know, when I think about our parents, I don't think they were trying to raise perfect kids, but teaching us how to fit into the norm of society and as it relates to white America. And so, you know, certain things you don't do because you know, you want to be able to blend in with society. And so now, I mean, it's almost like it's hard. You know, I think about, let's just talk about this. This is going to be good. Okay. I think about hairstyles. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm rocking my sister locks now for about 16 months. I see Jet has locks in her hair as well. So my youngest baby, he has locks. And I remember when he wanted to, he was walking around with an afro that was unkept. And the first thing I'm saying is, boy, comb your hair. You know, don't nobody want to see all that. When you go out in these streets, people are going to judge you. And so he said, well, I want to get some locks. I was like, nope, you're not getting that. And that day he came to me and he spoke the truth, right, Jet? He spoke the truth. He said, well, how is it that you have locks and I can't get locks?
Whoa.
You know, it was one of them things where I'm like, well, you know what? Let me think about that.
Let me check.
You know, I couldn't just say because I paid for it or because I'm grown.
Right.
You know, well, let's talk about these locks. Let's talk about how we can keep them tamed or presentable. But then why do we even have to go through all that?
Right.
You know, can you talk a little bit on that from a perspective of being, you know, you're the sheriff over department. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a deep question. So
it's deep.
I'm not the actual sheriff. I'm the director. The sheriff is
okay.
But close. Yeah, I think what you raised, and I get on my nephews all the time. You see, they hair me all over the place. I'm like, look, Uncle D got some clippers. I can fade you up real nice.
Look at Marcos.
Yeah, right.
Rock the crown.
Yes.
Rock it.
I love
but
it.
listen, I think this is part, Crystal, where times are changing too, right? When you look at whether it's popular culture or not, like this is where even in my generation, it just feels different because all the young fellas got their hair, you know, want the locks, want the big afro. And so it's been a kind of a switch. And I'll just say this, I love it. And I'm also conscious of making sure that my nephews in particular, because I think about Black boys a lot in this conversation, is making sure they know, though, is like there still is that fence line, right? And you got to know. And I think it's just a reality. It's unfortunate that as Black folks, we still have these conversations in 2021, but I think it's a reality. I hire a lot of people now. I just said this to our sheriff. I said, he's a Black man too. And I said, if we're not in the room, I feel like our folks still don't have a chance when it comes to the hiring practices. Because culturally, there are these little subtle things that sometimes different cultures do a little bit different. And historically, we've looked for certain kinds of things to hire people in, right? It's about the way people speak and the educational piece, even if those tasks aren't necessarily directly related to the job. So that's a long-winded answer, Crystal, but I get to your point of like, I still think, yes, there's a certain level of how we have to teach our babies that you still are operating in a double standard world. Let me give you all the love and affection and affirmation you need to be your authentic self. But let me also give you a certain level of the outside world, outside of this household, which you're going to have to face. And so to give them both of that, that's what makes parenting. I know one of the questions we were talking about earlier was about, you know, parenting your Black children for the future. That's one of the things that I still think, whether it is 40 years ago or today, that it's still very difficult to have to parent a Black child to know that this world outside of this household views you a certain way, and how you walk that balance to not have them hide their Blackness, to still live in their Blackness, but also just know that there are folks who are going to look at that and look down upon it. And so I think that that's just a very tough one. I don't have a magic answer for you, but I think that is something we just got to be prepared to really have a conversation with.
Yeah, I want to hop in and add. Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I wanted to ask, how do you go about that? Because you can ask Kelly Harris right now, right? I do not hide my Blackness, right? And a big thing that has really affected us, especially since I've left high school. So just a little background. I mean, I was born in Inkster, even though I wasn't there long, raised in Antioch, which is like middle class, lower middle class currently. But I was blessed enough to go to a private school. There was 12 Black kids in my grade, right? So there was a small group of us. Of course, I played the part for maybe a year and a half. And then after that, it was just like, I can't hide this. I can't hide myself. I can't wear this mask anymore. So I started just being me, and kind of like what we talked about, everything, all the conversations happening behind closed doors, right? And just being ready to have those conversations with your kids and actually listening rather than hearing. What are, I guess, some tools or maybe just some viewpoints on how do you do that without like tearing down the child? Because for me, it kind of felt like you can't post this on Facebook or on Instagram because it's going to look bad on me. And it's like, well, I mean, I understand that like the family dynamic, but I'm not out here like, you know, showing off guns and nothing. I'm asking real life questions, right? And it's like, well, don't ask that. You're gonna offend the wrong person. And it's like, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's me. And being an athlete, they're like, don't post this because you might not get this offer, or this job might not want to hire you. And me personally, it's like, well, I'm sorry, coach. I'm sorry, boss. But if I can't have conversations about racial equality, I don't want to work here or go to school here.
Yeah.
And but that's me. And I understand that I'm a reflection of my entire family. And it's, I don't know. I just feel like we've kind of butt heads in the past because it's, I mean, my opinions aren't my parents' views, right? Like I have my own views. And it's how do you balance like just that in the whole, like this is my reality. They do represent the family, and how do we kind of meet in the middle?
Right.
You know what, Marco, it's hard. It's very hard. You know, I've got the two younger sons are totally different. They're like night and day. And one of them is like all things black, black pride. You know, I just if he could look even darker, he would. You know, because it's all about it's just my pride for my people, and it's hard. It is, because we do have to have those tough conversations that white American families don't have to have with their children. They do not. Just trying to help him find the balance and understand that the world does not look like you and I. It doesn't. And so we have to learn how to function in a society that varies across the board. We do take into account, Marcos, how they feel about why they're wanting to express themselves in a certain manner. We do take that stuff into account. We take into account where it's coming from. You know, even though we don't understand, I can honestly say, as a parent, you're not going to always understand it or get it. Just like you said, your parents are like, you can't post that because that's a reflection of us. Now, I would be lying if I didn't say that to mine. I have said that. But then on the flip side, I come back and I say, well, what's going on here? What is it that you're really trying to say here? What are you trying to express here? You know, because society doesn't necessarily give you the options. When it's displayed in front of America, you don't get to explain. You know, then you're faced with the judgment. So, I mean, that's just a hard one all the way across.
I was gonna say, yeah, Mark, it's a hard one. It really is. But I also want to be a realist. Like I think we owe it to our kids to be truthful, right, and to have these very tough discussions and conversations. I also think it's what makes us unique and beautiful as Black people when we have to go through these struggles and we can do all these different things. It's not fair, but I think it also makes us so strong and flexible. But I will say, like, there's some truth to this. Again, I do hiring now. I sit at those tables. I watch how people perceive certain kinds of things. It's not right, but it's the reality. And if I'm not at the table and certain people go into that room to get that job, you're right. Like at my core, I don't want to work in a place like that. However, like some of these things are so subtle and implicit and just baked into society that even I do these things sometimes. Like, you know, I love academia. So if someone comes in there and they speak a certain way and they can spot off the latest theories or whatever, I'm naturally attracted to that. Not racially, but naturally attracted to that. And so we even as ourselves have to check ourselves with that. So I just think it's hard, Mark. I don't think there's an easy answer to it. The one thing I will say this though is, if you can talk about it, if you can have those kinds of conversations, because I see your post too, I'm like, okay, there go my nephew. But you know what? But there's a proud piece to that, which is people feel comfortable to express who they are, and then to have that conversation. If families are shutting that down and not willing to have that, I think that's where some of the conflict comes in at. So even if people don't agree with it, if we can talk about that, I think that's an important.
I'd like to add to this, and it's funny because perhaps I'm the one, because I am constantly cheering Marcos on, like, yes, say that, say it.
Yeah, that's right.
That. Yes, I got your back. And so when he's you know, having these very authentic posts and on Facebook or whoever he's talking to, like I'm in the back usually like the biggest cheerleader, like yes. One thing is really interesting for me, listening to you guys as parents, because it is complicated. Marcos, I'm listening because I was curious too. Like, I was like, gosh, how do you answer that question? And I saw in the chat, Chief Levite on it again. Like, he said, I went to Hampton. There it is. Yep. I went to Hampton University, and they wouldn't let you be a business major unless you were clean cut, no afros, no cornrows, no locks. And I'm like, man, like, that's Hampton, right? And it's a sad stereotype against Black people, but it's the world we live in. That's the other comment that he said. And I was just thinking, like, man, I remember how different it was even growing up in Michigan, Crystal. That contrast from me, because like Marcos, I grew up K-6 in an environment where it was me and one other Black child in my class. And I was always every year looking like, is Charles going to be in class? Shannon going to be in class? Like that's how we matriculated from year to year. And so in terms of cultural and racial identity, the beauty of how I grew up, obviously the neighborhood I grew up in was predominantly Black. The school system, K-6 I went to, was predominantly white. But then we had this just richness, again, in our family down South, right? So I was getting a nice blend of just a lot of stuff, right? But that intersection of trying to understand how to navigate and move was a little different, because I remember going down South, Crystal, and your squad grew up in predominantly Black schools.
Yep.
And I was like, where y'all don't have white people at your school? Like, it was so
not one.
Yeah. And so what was really interesting in terms of, as I grew up, now, I hit this really blackety black phase in middle school when I was trying to like get some discovery, right? But as I got older and I got to college and started rocking the natural, I think I went fully natural. I think maybe my second year of college or third. And I've been natural since, right? And so rocking like twists and fros and tapered fades and, all the things, right? I remember being a kid and wanting locks, and my parents were like, no. And it's interesting because my siblings, like my sister, has had locks her whole, like, as long as I can remember, right? So again, my half sister and like all her kids grew up with locks. And I was just kind of like, I don't understand how I can't get them, but my parents were just like, no, and my dad was real good about, you can't get them until you know what it means. Like, that was his thing, right? But to the point of, like, when I graduated from college, I had twist outs before they were trendy, right? And I remember my mom saying, I don't know if you're gonna get a job with your hair like that.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Right out of college. And I was just like, but I was like Marcos, like I've been very cut like him, where I was like, well, I don't want to work there. And so, right. Thankfully, one of my first jobs right out of college, they did hire me, and it was a white principal married to a Black woman with a kid who was a quadriplegic. So that compassion, like everything was there. And so he was a fantastic leader. And, I actually have not had challenges in my full expression of Blackness. I don't do a whole lot of code switching and this kind of thing. I think earlier years, I did a little bit, just because I was trying to navigate everything. But at this point, it's not a thing. Now, whether or not I lose out on certain opportunities, I'm sure, because there are implicit biases and, unconscious bias that plays out in certain environments. And maybe I'm just not privy to like what is going on behind the scenes in terms of their decisions, right? But I have been blessed, I will say that, to be able to just kind of rock who I am and have some really good fruit from that, in these environments that I've been in.
Well, I remember leaving Dayton, Ohio, after my husband was stationed up in Dayton, up in the Dayton area. And when we moved back here to the South, I remember applying for a job at a PWI, and I had just done a big chop. And, people around me was like, you ain't gonna get no job. You're not gonna get no job. Yeah. And I can remember being worried about that. I mean, I did get hired at the PWI, but it was there, Jet, that kind of started. It was like the catalyst of me becoming into who I'm pleased with, Crystal, my Blackness. Yeah. Because growing up in the Deep South, we weren't around a lot of diversity. Correct. I'm sure the Atlanta area, it's a look. I mean, it's more diverse than it was now, but it's like the Black Mecca. But when you move outside of that area and you start seeing different cultures and different types of people and religion and all that goes into it, you know, I wasn't used to that. I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I honestly, as a woman of color, I did have to make adjustments. It's unfortunate, but I did have to make some adjustments. But I remember moving back here in 2010 and I'm just like, this is who I am.
Yes.
You know, rocking an afro and then now locks. Did I think about it before I decided to lock my hair? Absolutely. But in the season that I'm in right now, I know who I am and I know who I belong to. Okay. So at this point in my life, I know my skill.
That's good.
And so it will behoove an organization if I want to be a part of the organization, for them to give me an opportunity, because it goes beyond what you see, the surface. But I had to get to that point. But I have said, Marcos, I have actually sat on interview panels and watched people that did not look like me come in interviews that weren't dressed for success and get jobs, while people of color, we have to know that we've got to come in dressed for success. You know, if you don't have on a suit and tie, it better be the right color or the right dress or whatnot, you're not getting no job.
Right.
But then other people can come in with no sleeves, like we're going to the beach. But see, I'm the chick that will call it out, and I have called it out. But I had to get to that point, you know, personally, to be confident enough to say, well, let's talk about what that individual had on. Let's have a conversation about that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You know. Good stuff.
A lot of great points, y'all. I love this. We're gonna have to have another one, I think.
I know it. We got off topic, but go ahead.
Right. But it's all good stuff. I did want to push to talking about mental health. Since we are celebrating Mental Health Awareness Week this week. So I don't know. What do y'all think about it? Do y'all get, do y'all go see a mental health therapist, or, how do y'all feel about it? Like, and what are some common misconceptions that you or someone has about therapy?
I'll start.
Okay.
So I'm super passionate about this, and it took me a long time to get there. I was someone, I think a lot of us, and I'll generally speak, but I think it applies, in the Black community, growing up, certainly in the generation that the bulk of this panel is, getting mental health help or some type of discussion centered around it was kind of taboo and stigmatized, and it still carries a stigma to a degree, right? And I am incredibly passionate about sort of just breaking and tearing that, like completely crashing into that stigma and just kind of diminishing it altogether. It's kind of a personal mission. I do receive therapy on a weekly basis. I've been with a therapist for some time now. Love it. I think I believe that people should have a therapist like they have a dentist. They need to have one and check in every so often. Now, whether you go in every 6 months for a cleaning, that's a little different. But for me, I just believe that having someone that you can process with, who is objective, who is neutral, who is safe, who is a good fit, because fit matters, right? All of these things I absolutely am a proponent for. And so, that's me. Now, again, I grew up an only child. There's a lot I internalized. And so because of that, I believe, it's critical. But I think even someone who thinks, oh, I have this great life, I still think that, they would benefit from having therapy.
And Kelly says, Rajette made me, and it was the best decision ever. I love my therapist.
I love your therapist. Like, yeah. I tell everyone, literally, like most of my friends and family hear me constantly, like, hey, therapist. So
yeah. Jen, I'm so glad you're advocating for that. What y'all don't know, especially the viewers that are out there, I'm going to share a little bit about how families are coming together strong, how it even became about. So when my spouse retired in 2017, for those that don't know out there in the internet world, We were living in two separate locations at the time. He was the professor of aerospace studies out at Howard University, and our sons and I were here in Georgia. And so when he retired, you know, I kept trying to figure out how in the world do I bridge these two households that have been living kind of separately for the last 2.5, 3 years? How do I bridge these households together? And so I remember when he transitioned out and he came back home, there were a couple of 5Ks going on in the city of Atlanta, and I had become an avid runner, and he was always a runner. I'm going somewhere with this, with the mental health piece. And we started running in 5Ks, and the kids enjoyed it. And so people were just like, oh my gosh, how do y'all get y'all kids out of there? Get out there and start running and have a love for it. But it was more about family time for us. And so somebody said, you guys should start your own 5K. And I was like, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
But, you know, I thought about the fact that, well, I'm running enough, I should be able to figure it out. And so I began to just think about this thing, and the Holy Spirit laid on my heart, what are some of the major things that breaks the family apart? It's particularly the Black family. I mean, all families, but you know, a center focus on, you know, Black families or families of color. And one of those things is a lack of mental health wellness. And that's why we're doing this tonight. We're talking about the importance of mental health wellness, physical wellness, financial literacy. Those are the things that, you know, the Facts team, we focus on. And I hope to have more events like this to be able to have candid conversation, because what I am seeing, I attended a conference a couple of weeks ago in the Savannah area for licensed professional counselors. I see that the younger generation, they are huge advocates for therapy. I mean, back in the day, you ain't gonna tell nobody that you're going to see a therapist, because what they're gonna say, you must be crazy. Well, that is a myth. Because like you said, if you can have the perfect life, well, nobody has the perfect life. You know, I see a therapist. My husband and I have seen a therapist together. So it is getting that unbiased opinion. Well, not even an opinion, a perspective. Sometimes when you've walked this walk for so long, you begin to get tunnel vision and you can't see right or left. You just can't. And then everybody's got their own perspectives. So I just think therapy is an opportunity for people to come in, get an unbiased perspective and get support and talk about the truth. Even in my bio on my website, I talk about the type of therapist that I am. You know, I use an array of therapeutic strategies. So I kind of call it eclectic, because I may dabble in some Freud, I may dabble in a whole bunch of other different counseling theories. But for me, I feel like it's all biblical based. And so at the end of the day, you know, it's me trying to help you understand what you're not seeing here. Or how can we change your perspective on something? Or how can we use what you experienced in childhood and bring you up to date? And so you can see how it's affecting your here and now.
All right.
That's good.
That's good.
So Brianna, I don't see a therapist right now, but so I went to school to be a therapist. I believe in it. I have in different points in my life when I'm going through things, mostly for me, I have seen a therapist. And like my sister said, she's like, I love my therapist. I did too. And I think one of the things that, we learn better, we do better. So years ago, as Crystal said, the stereotype was that, are you crazy? Well, we know now that, heart disease in the Black community is not just because of how we eat. It's part of that nutritional. It's also because of the level of stress that we carry on in our lives that we never deal with. And so we now know, science tells us, that mental health can have physiological impacts on your body. It can change your life expectancy. And I had someone tell me this before. We were doing a class on depression, and we were all talking about depression afterwards. And it was a woman, and she said, "I never thought about that. Was just my life. Like that's just how I operated. I never thought about it as mental health. That's just my everyday. I wake up this way. I go to sleep this way. These are the struggles that I deal with in my household. I never thought about them being mental health challenges."
Right.
And we're talking about families and parenting. That depression, that mental health struggle you may be having, whether you want it to or not, it gets passed on to your children, right?
Yeah.
You're saying that they're going to grow up and be, have the same mental health challenges, but whatever it is that is kind of within you as a parent, it is going to be impacting your young person, your child in some way. You may not realize it, but it is. So for those two reasons, I think it's hugely important it really impacts you physiologically, and it also can be passed on to your kids.
Yeah,
That's a good one,
I feel
Derrick.
like therapy is, I mean, to me, the key to peace, right? And how Miss Crystal had said, she ties everything back to the Bible, right? I feel like, you know, we have to be very selective in our words. Me and Jet have spoken about this recently, and I feel like everybody's on the chase for happiness and whatnot, right? And I think it was actually one of the questions that was sent to us just to kind of think about. And it was like, what do you tell people that don't go to therapy because they have Jesus? And correct me if I'm wrong, but just from my research, never in the Bible did Jesus promise us happiness. He offered us eternal peace, but it never says happiness. And I feel like that's key for everybody, right? We can't, I mean, obviously people do, but I feel like it's very challenging to parent when you're not at peace with yourself or just with your surroundings, right? And like what Uncle D said, your traumas are passed down generationally. I keep on looking over to my computer because I actually put in our school group chat, like asking some questions, and somebody had responded and was like, they feel like therapy is very important, especially for the Black community, because you know everything that we've been through, especially for people my age, because I mean you can hear it like all the generations that gonna hate on rap, but if you listen to a lot of rappers, right, they're hurting. I mean, one of my favorite rappers, Polo G, literally has a song that's top 100 on Billboard, and one of his lines is, "Anxiety is killing me. I just want to leave Earth." Right, and it's like back to how we talked about. No one has the perfect life. This man's a multimillionaire. He's famous. You know, he could have everything, any and everything he wants, and he still has those mental struggles. And just from talking with my close friends, a lot of us, especially, and I can only speak for Black men in my circle, but a lot of us feel numb, right? And it's just numb to everything because, you know, we all have our own battles, and we feel like we all hold the weight of the world, and not having somebody to open up to. I mean, we kind of touched on boys don't cry, boys don't show their feelings, especially Black boys, right? We're not doing that. That's you gonna do that, do it in the room, clean your face before you walk out. And you know, a lot of people turn to opioids, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. And you know, unfortunately, there's a large population, obviously, of men. Men commit the most suicide in the U.S., especially college age boys, right? My age, and it's, you know, I feel like therapy is very important. And to Rajet's part, fit is very important. I tried to go to therapy and I stopped because it was too professional, right? They were not really. To me, it's easier to speak to somebody when you feel like there's a true relationship or like they're your friend. Not when I'm gonna sit across this 12-person desk and it's just you and I, and I'm gonna sit here with my arms folded and just be like, and then like not provide value. And like I do feel like it is important for us to have people that we can vent to and not have them speak at us. But sometimes, or at least in my case, most of the time when I do speak to somebody about what I'm feeling, I'm looking for advice, and I like personable advice. Not I'm gonna read this or give you this quote or this line that I memorized in class to relay that information to you.
Marcos, you said something powerful about boys don't cry. That right there. That's not the first time I've heard that. And the most unfortunate thing about men of color that don't cry, because you have not learned how to express feelings and emotions. Then what does that really look like when you grow up? When you grow up, do you become abusers? Do you check out in marriages and relationships? And when I say check out, I mean unplug, don't communicate. You know, walk out on families. you know, because you weren't allowed to deal with those feelings and emotions as a child. You know, even when my sons are upset, you know, I can remember my husband telling me when they were little, you have to allow them to feel. Remember, somebody said earlier, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. You gotta allow these children to feel. These young men, they have to know what that feels like, because you know, life is gonna happen. And when you get married or you're in these relationships with other people, you don't know how to communicate. So then you either start yelling, or you putting your hands on somebody, or you walking out, or, you know, it's so many different things that we don't even realize, that if we don't teach our young men how to deal with feelings and emotions, what manifests as an adult.
Right.
Yep.
I would love to add a little bit to this. So when I started the Narrative Shifts platform, I kicked it off with a 5-part series on Black men and mental health. Like, that's how I started Narrative Shifts. And I remember it all came together because, you know, last summer I was just kind of thinking about everything that had been happening in our community, right? So the deaths of another Black male, right? Like, these kinds of things just compounded over time. And I was like, man, you know, like, we all feel that. We all take that in, right? Because we have fathers, we have brothers, we have nephews, you know, like, we know Black men as women, but like, I was having a hard time just taking this in, thinking, how do they express? So to your point, you know, that you just made, Crystal, about all these different ways that them internalizing can then show up, right, and be really toxic or damaging, right? One of the things that I shared, you know, even in that series, and I learned this, and it was really sort of the main point for me to begin therapy my own self. There was an older gentleman. I was living in California at the time. He was a Hispanic old dude, right? And he had worked for some Christian therapists for years, right? And so I was actually in his leadership team. And, you know, for whatever reason, he could just see what I had been going through. You know, I had some compounded loss in my family, and there were like 6 people that died within a year span, and it really just messed with me, right? And I was still trying to hold everything together, be in grad school as a full-time student and working and ministry and all the things. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, Rajette, you can only hold a beach ball underwater for so long. Like, and I mean, he didn't know anything about me. Like, he just came and blindsided me with that. And I was gutted, like, man. And I thought about that even further. You know, you take a beach ball and you try to really push that underwater. Not only can you not do it for long, but you're going to be hurting your sore. You know, there's so many other aspects to that thing where you injure yourself. Right. And so from that point, you know, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I need to maybe start some therapy, right? But when I think about our Black men, man, Crystal, you made an excellent point, because I really hadn't thought about how it over the years can just manifest in all these different ways. And of course, you know, what we do see, you know, even to Marcos's point, sometimes we don't see Black men who are open to going to therapy or seeing someone, this kind of thing. And, you know, I know probably Derrick can probably speak to this, you know, even more, I'm sure. But I know one of the things that, you know, I encourage, at least the brothers in my life, is like, dude, like it is about fit. So like Marcos, you know, you said, you know, there's this table and, you know, whatever, like the desk and all that stuff, this proverbial sort of description that you gave. That's true. Like, that's honest. I had a terrible, I don't want to say terrible, I had a not so great therapist my first time in, you know. The second one I thought was great. The one I have now is phenomenal, right? And so I feel the one I have now incredibly relational, right? So you know, she's able to communicate things with me. I'm able to communicate things with her, and it doesn't feel like there's textbook stuff coming my way. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so, so I think, you know, it may take like, all right, let me try this one. Let me try, you know, you get somebody that you really do feel comfortable with. That's just something I wanted to share, you know, but it's good to have outlets and, you know, like obviously other people you can just chop it up with who are neutral. Right.
And I think it's important for us to be able to talk like this. So I'm so thankful for y'all pulling this kind of conversation together, because the same thing happens with the healthcare field. You know, we grew up without health insurance, so we never really went to the doctors. And when I got old enough, even if I had healthcare, it was such an uncomfortable, unknown endeavor to go to the doctor's office. So me physically taking care of myself on a regular basis was something I had to learn to do and pass on. And I think the same thing around mental health. The more we can talk about this, share with our families and say, yeah, you need this therapist or go see this person. I think we owe it to ourselves to be able to do that. So I thank you for the opportunity to be on this. This is a great discussion.
Somebody in the chat, Maya said, Maya Green said, we're also teaching our daughters not to be weak as well. So then they'll grow. So they will be independent. Yeah. And that's a fine line too.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to speak on that?
We actually have made it to time. Do you want this to be the last?
Yeah, let this be the last comment. She's doing such a wonderful job. Thank you so much.
So good. I don't know. You want Crystal? You want to take it, or you want?
Well, it's a fine line because oh my goodness, especially women of color. You're taught to grow up and get your education or get some type of skill so you can take care of yourself so you won't need a man. Right. No, we don't want you to need a man. We want you to want one or to desire one, if that's what you want, to have a partner, a part of your life. But even with that, we've got to find balance in it, because what will happen is you'll see a society full of strong women that don't know how to cohabitate in a relationship with somebody other than themselves, and the same thing for a man. Yeah. So, it's just a fine line. This conversation can go on for hours, you guys. I'm looking at the chat. I'm seeing the hearts and the thumbs up. We're just going to have to do this again.
It's so good. Yes.
Definitely.
We're going to have to do this again. Yeah. Thank y'all so much for offering all the advice and just offering all the experiences that y'all have had in your personal lives. We really do appreciate it. Like, we're going to have to do another one of these.
For sure.
So, at this time, do y'all have any final remarks, or maybe you want to plug some of your events that are coming up, if you have any coming up?
Jen, do you have any that you want to plug?
So for me, Narrative Shifts, I was taking May off to just kind of recalibrate and relax a little bit, try to refresh and rest all the R's there. I'll be back up in June, so I would love for anybody who's interested in kind of what's going on with me and my platform. Check out Narrative Shifts on Facebook. Instagram page is also at Narrative Shifts, or you can follow me, Rajette Speaks, on Instagram, or my actual name on Facebook. And so you'll that way you'll be able to kind of just keep up with what's going on. We don't have anything just set just yet. We've got some things that we're doing. So, yeah.
Marcos, do you have anything?
I'm just kind of all over the place. I put my ad, I make it very simple. It's at Marcos Harris Jr. on every social media platform. As we kind of touched on at the beginning, I do a lot. So it's hard for me to plug one simple thing. But I just wanted to leave everybody. I heard somebody say this. I can't remember. Shout out to TikTok. I know it was on TikTok. But we're all looking for love, right? And love isn't a feeling. Remember that. Love's not a feeling. Love is what you do no matter how you're feeling. And that just touched me very much. I feel like, and that ties everything back to mental health. Can't truly show love if you're not in love with yourself, right? Right. But yeah, so I don't have anything to plug right now, but yeah, just keep up with me on social media. You'll see some crazy posts here and there.
What about you, Derrick?
I think love, it was the thing that I wrote down. I feel like whether it's your children, your family or not, you might make mistakes along the way. You might yell like Crystal did. You might say, I look like Boo Boo the Fool to you, or, any of that. But I think at its core, you can show love to your, I'm thinking about children right now. That's the one thing that will bring them back. So that's the piece for me. I know it's not a part of this discussion, but I always want to take an opportunity to say this. I am a social worker who runs a police agency. And so police brutality, police violence is a huge thing for, that we're talking about in the country, but particularly for Black folks. I'll just say this. If you want to talk about this discussion or think about and look at a place where at least we're trying to do it right, I encourage people to think about Washtenaw County. You have a social worker running a police agency. That's just one little definition of how to think about this work. So I just wanted to highlight that. Washtenaw is in Michigan. It's right outside Detroit. Check us out.
You know you got to spell that. You know you got to spell that, right?
Yeah, spell that for us.
Okay. Yeah. It's Washtenaw. So WASH Wash, and then TE Naw NAW. Washtenaw, Michigan.
I had the opportunity, guys, to interview Derrick. What was this? Maybe about 3 months ago on the show on Narrative Shift. So you guys, if you want to check that show out, we had a fantastic discussion about the intersectionality of Black lives, blue lives, and the community from that angle. So you can catch that show as well.
Okay.
All right, Crystal.
Last but not least, the only last words that I have to say in regards to mental health is, as it relates to parenting, we have to be willing to change and make some adjustments in our parenting as it relates to our children, and remember, people, keep in mind that every child is different. So personalities are going to be different. Your personality is different. Be willing to listen with an open heart. Also, our website is the number 3 facts with an S, INC, .org. So we try our best to have quarterly events. We should be having a 5K coming up later in the year. That'll be our 3rd 5K since we've been an organization, a nonprofit. But we try to focus on, like I said, mental wellness events and physical wellness and financial literacy. I know a couple of the team members, we had an employment readiness workshop a couple of months ago, as well as a college readiness workshop where we were talking about how to fund college for our students and get out of college debt free. So we try to talk about things that are pressing. If anybody has any topics that they want to talk about, feel free to look us up on our website because we're open about educating our people, but educating everybody at the same time. So thank you guys so much. And we just look forward to spending some more time with you in the future.
This has been great. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Y'all have a great evening, okay?
All right. Thanks.
Thanks. All right.
Is it off? Are we? How did